Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Area Control Bros. We made it past 13. I never thought I'd see the day, but it's a big threshold. Today we're
Due to
talking,
like the unluckiness of the number, that's what's making it a threshold.
well,
Yeah.
there's that, but also, maybe now that we've broken past 13, we can make it past 99, right? Like that's the next big threshold.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is this like a commonly known
Yep.
podcasting thing?
Yep. This is actually true. 95% of podcasts die before their 14th episode.
Well,
Wow.
we
Yep.
are the
Oh,
5%.
yeah.
And one day when we pass number 99, it will be the 1% or the
That's
0.1% or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or not.
Living
anyway.
in our ivory towers.
Today we're talking about arcs. I made a joke about it on our Andromeda's Edge episode, but obviously everyone's talking about this game. I believe it is currently number one on the hotness. I was waiting for a retail copy, so finally I got one and we played it a few times. The reaction to this game critically has been very polarized. I've heard people say that you either love this game or hate this game, but I went to the comments on BGG, like the ratings breakdown. There are more people that gave this game a 10 than gave it a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 combined, which isn't necessarily that weird. This is just more evidence of rating inflation with modern board games. Actually, I was looking at other board games like in the top to see if any other games had a comparable amount of overwhelming amounts of tens, and there are some other games. Twilight Imperium actually has an overwhelming amount. The funniest one I found was actually Frosthaven has more tens than it has every single other number rating combined,
Really?
which
That's
is
quite nuts. I guess there's a bit of a filter with Frosthaven, though. Like, probably a lot of people who have already played
it's
Gloomhaven going
people
to
who
it.
have already felt self-filtered to already know that they like the game and it's like the game part two. So
Right.
that kind of makes sense. But this game, I think, is understandably should be more polarizing. I don't think this game is a 10, but I don't think it's a 1. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But
And not like as well defined in terms of its sort of genre as something like Frosthaven would be, you know? I mean, this
yeah.
game is trying to do a lot. And so yeah, I would agree that there's plenty of reason that people ought to be divided on this.
Yeah, I think there are things to like in this game and there are things that are definitely points where the game can kind of lose you. So I am
Yeah.
shocked that it isn't more of a standard distribution. I
Should we give
I
the Yes, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as somebody who did statistics for a while, I feel uncomfortable when I see a board game rating distribution that doesn't follow like the bell curve or like the standard distribution. So something deep within me makes it starts, alarm
Well,
bells start going
well,
off. It's
be
like something's
be
wrong.
careful there, Will. I mean, take another look at it. It's half of a bell curve. A lot of people
It
here
is
probably
half of
wanted to rate it a 14,
that's
you know?
that's one way to look at it is that 10 is the centralizing point for the standard distribution here. But I don't know. But anyway, this is a game that is trick taking and area control with a
Yeah,
little bit
that's
of
that was all I was
tableau.
gonna say was should we give the log line, which
Yeah, definitely.
is trick taking 4x kinda, right? No, that's not 4x.
No,
It's just area control. There's
there's
no like
there's no exploration, and yeah,
yeah,
I
everything's
mean,
pretty set. Yeah.
I
I'm
don't.
not sure if you can be exterminated either. I guess you can, right? Unless there's something in the rule preventing it.
You can expand. You can exterminate. I think you could be pretty much like wiped out.
I
I
mean,
think so.
almost every area control game is 3X's, but I think
Right.
4X has like a few extra connotations. Like often there's like a tech tree or like some
Yeah.
ability to like improve or
Yeah.
diversify your
It's kind of gone
civilization.
before beyond just the 4X's and become more of like a genre of its own, like where
Yeah,
you have to fit the schema of other 4X games, and I don't think this does.
yeah, there are a lot of bonus tropes than more than just the normal, just the literal 4X's. So yeah, this definitely is not in that category. In fact, this game doesn't actually feel like a war game at all. This feels kind of like a war game for people that like don't play war games.
I think we talked about it. It feels like an abstract game
It
almost.
is. There's almost no theme here. It's interesting because I spent an inordinate amount of time browsing the comments for this game because I think I wanted to get like a good idea of what people really like and what they're bouncing off of. And I saw a lot of people saying the art sucked. I saw a lot of people saying that they love the art. I saw a lot of people saying it was very thematic. Saw a lot of people saying that there was no theme at all. And so there's really this is an interesting thing to talk about because this game really sucks some people in and really spits some people out. I'm in the camp where I think this game has no theme whatsoever. In fact, the theme that is there is kind of off-putting to me. Like it's kind of um
It's off,
like
but
like the flying stapler spaceship
right,
I
type
right,
thought it was
stuff.
kind of funny. I like that.
But I mean, but it doesn't bring you into the setting, right? It's not like, oh, now I'm in, you know. It's kind of like
right.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point too of like that people can feel so differently about a game's theming and one person can say no, no theme comes through. I mean, this game might as well be chess, you know, and another person can say, well, it's so thematic. Like every single move you do, like I can connect it back to running this empire. And I'm kind of with you, Will. I don't really see that on this one. Um,
I'm also in that same camp. I don't really
yeah.
feel I this is not a game that is made of a lot of like story moments.
Hmm.
There's nothing in this game that's like, oh wow, he did that thing, you know? Like, oh, it was like a story hap
Right.
thing happened, you know? Like there's so many games that are like that. Like I can like rattle off a bunch like Forbidden Stars, Twilight Imperium, Uprising. All of those games like have these moments where it's like, wow, this thing happened.
Right.
And this is more like a game, and that's why I think it feels like an abstract game. It's more like somebody like clicked a thing over on an abacus, and you're like, "Wow, he just got a
Right.
marginal benefit."
Right.
Whoa, like,
And it's so true. Even one of the big things that prevents this from being sort of a story game for me is the fact that only one side in combat is rolling dice. Like, what sort of story does it tell when you're facing, one ship and you roll all your raid dice and you just like start hitting your own ships a bunch? It just feels hard
I
to
guess
connect to some of
yeah,
that stuff,
I can see where they're going there, which is like it's simulating how aggressively you're fighting and how like openings you're leaving for the enemy, but it doesn't feel that
I
good.
don't think
And
it quite gets there, but
yeah, I don't
I
think it
can
really
kind of
achieves
see it,
that.
yeah, but I don't think it quite
Yeah,
gets there.
I'm not excusing it. I'm just like saying I at least can see where the dice are
Yeah,
coming
it
from.
was a nice idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to see more games that try to, you
Yeah.
know, do like, because I think yeah, there's a bit of like, you can think about, well, how are they theming this? What are they trying to get at with the dice in terms of theme? We can also say, what are they trying to get at mechanically? And the only thing that I've come up with is that they're trying to essentially have less dice rolling in a dice rolling game. Instead of having two sides to the combat, we'll just have one. We're going to simplify it. And to me, that's not a place where you need to simplify. Maybe there's a different mechanical reason that I can't quite grasp, but um, yeah,
yeah, I
eh,
mean, it's like I'm not doing anything. You're just like subject to the whims of the dice. Both of you are. Like, and like that's always the case, but at least
right.
when I'm rolling the dice for my own ships, I feel like I have some control.
Yeah, it totally
Like,
changes the way you feel about it and think about it, and I think it allows more of that story to come through in a big way.
yeah.
This game, it's interesting you bring up the feel. I think this game is a game that doesn't really care how you feel.
Hmm.
It's kind of demanding that you make the best move, even if it's going to just make you look like a massive asshole. And I don't really mind if I'm like that guy, because that's just I am an asshole. Like I've long since accepted this fundamental character trait. But I think that this is one of those games where even for me, I'm like, damn, like, why is this game designed to like make me hurt
Hmm.
people this much? It's like
Right.
excessive. It's like,
Why did
somebody's
you
like
make me do this?
it's
And
like
and
it's
it'll
like
make
some
you decide it multiple times in one turn too, which almost feels,
it's like somebody's
more
knocked
mean.
out in a wrestling ring and like my like optimal abstract move is like to jump onto like like onto the ropes outside the ring and just like slam on their back with my elbow. And it's
Right.
like, damn, they're already down. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
why is this the play? Like I hit them with the elbow and a bunch of like loot pops out every time I do it. It's just like
Yeah.
that's the
And they can't
game.
defend themselves. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they're
That
not
that
allowed to defend
happens in this
themselves. They're
game,
just like, oh,
especially we
okay,
found
where's line here?
with the spaceports we found that happens a lot. Like people will just keep raiding the spaceports because why wouldn't they get to steal your cards and the like,
Yeah,
and yeah.
I yeah, they're
Especially
okay.
once they've cleared
Yeah.
out your ships and then it's very hard for you to go back in and defend.
Okay. Well, I think we should rewind and go back to like the structure of the game a little bit before we start
Yeah.
going off crazy. But I think the core of the game is this trick taking mechanism. And when I was about to play this game, this was the thing I was the most afraid of because I don't love trick taking. But I think that the trick taking aspect of this game is actually the strongest part of the design. I can easily see how somebody who loves trick taking games, but doesn't play area control games, might play this game and love it. Because for them, it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like, well, I won the trick, so of course I'm gonna mess you up. Like it's just like if you're kind of there's like two ends to come at this logic. One is like you're coming at it from the area control direction, which is like, where's my agency? I don't have any, or very minimal. And then, but if you're coming at it from like the trick taking direction, it's like, well, I won the trick. Of course I get to like get some benefit for doing so. And so, setting that aside, though, I do think that the card play of this game is good. Like, I think it's like you have options, and it feels like there's some interesting decisions to make, and you can be tracking what cards people have to some extent. Um,
And it's quite important too, I would say, as with all trick-taking games. I agree that the card play is probably the strongest part. In terms of like comparing this to another trick-taking game, one place where I get a little frustrated, and I think others might, is that because you have so much happening in between card plays while keeping the same hand, that ability to track other people's hands becomes kind of exponentially harder because you're having to think about so many other things alongside it. And sometimes, you know, the last part of the turn might be 30 minutes later than the first part of the turn, and you're still needing to remember what cards were played 30 minutes ago, which is quite a span of time compared to most trick taking games, I'd say. um Certainly the ones that I've played, and I found that pretty difficult in this.
And it's also super weird when it's like I like there's sometimes you like win the trick, but it doesn't feel like great, you know?
Mm,
Like the things that you're actually able to like translate that into. It's like, oh well, they played the mobilization like two or whatever, and I can win this with the mobilization six. But really, I would like much rather be like building a spaceport or something. Like
right.
it's like you get a little bit separated to where like it's like obviously it's good to win the trick because then you lead the next one and then you can like do more of presumably what you want to do. Um but I don't know, like there's like so much other things to consider than just like winning the trick.
Yeah.
It's which is like, I'll give the game this, it's unique. Like I've never played a game like this, and it blends these two genres like in an interesting way, but it kind of just hurts my brain in a way that I don't particularly enjoy.
Mm,
Like I just kind of end up like, like overheating. And it's kind of funny because even in the rule book, they're like, it's best when it just flows. And I'm like, I don't know if this game is built to
right. Yeah,
flow,
it's a
you
very
know?
murky decision space, so it's hard to then be asked like, well, just let it happen. And it's
Yeah,
like,
just go for it?
I don't know, man. I feel like this game is won by like a bunch of, incrementally better decisions. And it's pretty hard to do that when you're asked to not think about them by the rule book. I think it's a,
the rule book
you
is yeah, the rule
you
book's
ought to
like,
ignore it.
whatever, just just play the game, and Arcs
Right.
thrives when it flows. It's like
Yeah.
It's like maybe it
verbatim. Yeah.
flows once you've played it, 10, 15, 20 times and have a better grasp on this stuff, or maybe you're more familiar with trick taking. And then, I mean, even in something as simple as like, memorizing the cards is going to make this flow a lot better. You're asking me for the game to flow, and then every time a new card comes out, it's like a paragraph of text.
That's
Um,
that's one thing we need to
I
talk
kind of
about.
need to look and read it,
Yeah,
that's going to stop the flow.
the court um court cards are like a whole topic. So this is obviously like a holdover from Cole designing Pax Pamir and, maybe to some extent John and Company, but this is just like straight up sort of Pax Pamir's type cards coming out. And there's a lot of text on them. And so it's like, oh, new court came out. And unless as Blake said, you played this game a bunch of times, you're gonna have to read all these cards. And there's a lot of text on them. That's gonna slow down the game.
Yeah.
There is a world where everybody knows this game in and out, and it's like, oh, it's that card. Oh, it's that card. Okay, I've already read it. I've memorized the whole game. Not a big deal.
Hmm.
But it does slow down the game, and more than slowing down the game, I'm not confident that the court is adding a whole lot to the game in the kind of way that I like, because you have this design that's really close to being an abstract, with the trick taking and kind of the core actions. And then you have the court throwing a wrench in here. This is like making a sandwich. You get this beautiful slice of trick taking bread. You've got this really nice strawberry jelly area control, and you got a tub of peanut butter right here, and you reach right past it for, a gallon of soy sauce, and you just pour it all over the sandwich, and it makes it all soggy and gets in the jelly. And it's kind of like,
And the soy sauce is the court, huh?
it's just kind of like, hey, you could have just used the peanut butter. It's like you didn't have to do this. This game feels like there were a bunch of really conscious decisions to make the game more unique without actually caring whether or not like the unique things that were chosen would make the game like better. It's kind
Hmm.
of like we're going to make a game that's different, and it's like, but will it be good? It's like, what? That's not the goal here.
I, it's an interesting take, Will. I'm really curious about this analogy of reaching past the peanut butter and for the soy sauce because we've all three talked together about, one particular mechanic that involves the court, these cards, kind of the card market available to buy, um, which is the rating mechanic. And if you destroy a city, you get to ransack the court. I guess that's not really the rating mechanic, but kind of interrelated with raid. And ransacking the court is very strange because you can't do it if other people have not placed their loyalists on court cards and attempt to buy them. And so the couple times that we've played, it's felt like putting anything into the court later in the game is kind of disadvantageous because it opens up plays for other people and they're basically incentivized to come and blow up your stuff because it'll get them a free card and get them your loyalists as their slaves or what do they call them, as their
Trophies instead
captives.
of captives. Well, that's
Right,
the other
right.
thing I
They
don't
get
like
them
as much
as
about it.
trophies, but they
Yeah.
they get this bonus basically of like not only a new card, a new resource in that way, but also like easier to score warlord later on. Um, so to me, that's sort of an obvious disconnect from the design, but it sounds like your complaint might be larger than that with the court deck, Will.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is a mechanic that could not exist or be a problem if the court deck did not exist. You're
Right.
ransacking the court,
Yeah, but
right?
to me that was kind of my only problem with the court, other than them being kind of text heavy.
The text
But I thought they
heaviness is
added to
one
the game
thing,
otherwise.
but I think that a lot of okay, so this is kind of like a lot of the court cards are like the game design creates a problem and the court solves the problem.
Hmm.
Like a lot of the court is stuff that's either dealing with outrage or in some cases causing outrage or manipulating outrage in some way. And like I feel like that's just not interesting to me because like I'm
Yeah.
not a huge fan of the outrage part of this design in the first place. And to see so much stuff in the court deck that's focused around this one mechanic that I don't love is kind of like not that interesting to me. Like
Right.
I I guess I don't mind the court deck existing, but I think they win in a really like I almost would have preferred if the cards were like weirder, but a lot of them
Yeah.
feel almost too safe. And
Yeah.
some of
Like you
them
have all
it's
the loyalists that kind of make it so that you're immune to outrage of their type. And then there's like a couple of cards that give you a bank of those resources that you kind of score with Tycoon, the barrels and the crates, and those are both kind of uninteresting. And then they have cards that let you fill your whole board with those same two resources. There's one of each of those. Those are also pretty uninteresting. So I can see what you mean. There's a lot of cards that kind of they don't do anything particularly cool. It's kind of just like, stop outrage, or there's a few that, you get to do some outrage or
I want to see more stuff like the Galactic Bards card, or things that let you kind of like get some sort of interesting ability. I want the court to be more like the Comet tech trees or something.
yeah.
Give me stuff that's gonna like make my faction feel like more different or like cool. And as
And
is
and
that
even the cards that are like this in the game, you can't really build around them because if they're too good, someone's going to come and
somebody's gonna
steal
come
them
take
from
them. But I
you.
guess that's my other thing is like all the especially the tycoon cards are so important for scoring like tycoon or not tycoon, what's it called, cartel. The cartel cards are so important for scoring like tycoon that like you just by taking it from the court you're putting this massive target on your back. And then of course once it's in your tableau, people are now going to blow up your stuff to try and steal it from you directly, or even before you bought it, just by putting an agent on it in the court, you're putting a target on yourself for the court to be ransacked and for somebody to just take the card before you can even secure it.
Right.
I do think that the decision to separate out the ability to secure an influence is good. I actually think that's like a good part of the design because I think having to be exposed in the court before you can grab something that's powerful is good because it's a point of interaction. I just think that the ways to interact with it are simply too powerful. Like, I don't think it's bad that you can interact with people getting stuff in the court. It's just like it's like using a bazooka to like kill a fly. It's
Mm,
like you go over and annihilate their civilization to get one card from them. And
right.
this happens like all the time. Like
Yeah, I think it's often the best play to go and
yeah,
try to sit and hover over somebody's spaceport or maybe even their city if you're not particularly bothered by being outraged in that type. Maybe it's on a weapons planet, which I've found to be relatively low value compared to the other
I think
tiles.
Which I guess is my other thing is like again, like you were talking about this, the game does encourage you to be a bit of an asshole because it's like like in terms of theme, it's like usually the optimal play is for me to like go and hover over somebody else's stuff, like tax them and steal their people. And also like I like a lot of the time you kind of end up like leaving your own cities to go and do this, and you're just like, I don't know, completely irresponsible. Like it feels like you need to be doing this kind of stuff in order to be like having a chance. It felt like we really had to be like at each other's throats and checking each other a lot and like going and stealing each other's cards. And that was like really the only way to like, score sometimes. And also it felt like a lot of like, well, I can't score this, so we're just gonna like make everybody outraged on it, and everybody's gonna lose all of their resources and all of these cool cards. Like I had Galactic Bards and it was a cool card, and it was like, nope,
Outraged. Yeah.
outraged.
From
Everybody got
from one of those
outraged on that.
Vox cards, I think they're called, right?
Yeah.
yeah, like
It's
they
like
could have
that card's
just
ridiculous. Yeah.
Cole could have just not put outrage in the game, and I think attacking cities would still be maybe too good. Like, because the thing is well, okay, so obviously removing outrage makes attacking cities better, and having outrage in the game is a nerf to attacking cities. However, my point is that attacking cities is usually still the right thing to do. So it feels like the outrage mechanic is like a slap on the wrist sometimes. You're
Yeah.
always aware of what you're sacrificing. In some cases, you might have the court card that blocks it anyway, so you just don't give a shit. And and then it just feels like it's an unnecessary rule that just doesn't need to be in the game then. There are some times where it is relevant, but the times that it's relevant, I never feel like boy, I'm glad this mechanic is in the game and it existing improves like the flow of the game or the balance
Hmm.
of the game. I like I said, I think that outrage being removed and the ransacking the court being nerfed like hard would be better for the health of the game. Like in terms of promoting the kind of play that, because you have
Right.
to remember that
And
like,
then balance around that
and then
ecosystem.
balance around that ecosystem. Because I think that the problem with ransack the court that we run into is that because you cannot influence and secure in the same action, which I do think is a good design decision. Like I said, I think that's fine. But because
Ben
that's
has pointed out that if the leading card played has an influence action, you would be able to do it with a psionic token as well as a relic token.
oh, so you
Yeah.
can do it with psionic then
But
relics. That's
that
true.
I think is the only way unless you have a particular card that does it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So with the right resources, you can do it. But outside of that, where was I? It was oh gosh, my
You were
train of
just
thought.
starting to say how it that as a point of balance of like not being able to influence and secure that card from the court in the same turn. And I think that is good that it's that way. I would rather see that, okay, now we kind of have almost this bidding war in the market that sort of plays out over time where the relative values of the cards are able to be determined by like people over multiple turns having to influence this thing until people are like, well, no, I'm not willing to. Like that's a really cool system, but it doesn't work when Ransack the Court is there. I don't know if that's where you're going with it,
That
but
is exactly where I was going, which is that it creates this problem. Thanks, Blake. I was having a old man moment. Um, it's basically like you want to get cards from the court that are going to benefit from you, but by putting an agent in the court, you're exposing yourself to becoming a target for ransack the court. And as a result, people are just not inclined to put anything in the court. Like there are regularly turns where it's just like, man, I don't want to put an agent in the court,
yeah,
even if I'm leading with an influence card, because like
especially later in the game, I would say.
Again,
later in the
But
I
game, yeah.
I genuinely think if you got rid of outrage, you could get rid of ransack the court too, and then like just killing a city would still sometimes be like a good play because it would deny them resources or victory points because you get like an extra kicker if you're like the first place and you have like all of your cities out. It's like, and it's not an insubstantial amount of points. You can get like 5 extra points per first place objective.
right.
And
I
like it
think
would still be worth like going and blowing people's cities up, even if you weren't able to ransack the court. You'd still be like it would still be worth going and killing people for that reason.
Yeah,
And
maybe
like,
you want that land at that point, you know?
well, I
right,
mean, you
like,
still have access to taxing too, which is really good. When
yeah,
and so, but I think it'd be better if like blowing up a city was like the equivalent. Okay, so first of all, I guess we have to go into dice, but it would be better in my opinion if raid dice just got removed from the game entirely because they're like the dumbest dice type. And instead, when you blow up a city, you just take a card from their tableau. Get rid of all this key stuff. Nobody cares. And so like and like this, the swiveling around of resources on your tableau, depending on the keys, depending on the raid dice. This is another mechanic that does not need to exist. It simply does not need to exist. If you blow up somebody's city, you get a card from their tableau and you get like one resource from their tableau. Don't make people be like, oh, I didn't realize you're going to roll that way. Well, let me just readjust the resources in my tableau because the rule book is not exactly clear on when you can change the kind of the order of your resources. And because of that, there's this ambiguity that's going to be exploited by people and be like, oh, well, it doesn't say I can't do this. And, I'm just going to move the thing you want into the triple key spot. So take this thing I don't care about. And it's kind of like, it doesn't feel good for either player, right? It's kind
Right.
of like, I'm here, I rolled these raid dice, half my ships are blown up because my ships don't know how to raid apparently. And all I got was this thing I don't care about. Why am I even here? Like, why did I do this? And in the event that you blow up the city, you get to ransack the court, which is also feels bad because like now you're
Very, very swingy, those
yeah,
raid
it's
dice.
very swingy the raid dice. Like it's like you might get nothing and lose half your ships. You might completely destroy the other person's chance of winning the game after this at all. And you just don't know. Like it just who knows what's gonna happen.
yeah. I think that's my main problem with this game is it feels like there's a lot of complexity you could trim out of it and still retain a good amount of the like strategic depth. And I think that there's a lot of these subsystems or just like some kind of weirdness with how some of this stuff interacts with each other that like you could have a much simpler game without sacrificing a lot of the core that like is good. But
Right.
like it I think this is generally what leads me to kind of like overheating and not really being able to just let it flow, man. Like just
Yeah.
play the game and like, don't think so much about it. It's like there's a lot of this like really like weird edge cases of like, well, is the best move here for me to like suicide like three ships over into this fleet to raid this town to get this card, and then I have to outrage. But actually, he played a build, like he played the two of build, but I could still do this if I played the
Hmm.
like fucking like the gas like resource that I have and I could still do it with but then I'd have to like play this weapon as well, and maybe I need and like
Like
you
a
just end
very
up
murky decision space, this, you know?
yeah. Like,
And you
like
said something earlier about that regarding you know, sometimes it might be better even if you can follow a card and play one of a higher number. Sometimes you need to do an action so bad that it might still make sense to play off suit, as it were. And like that might be the best play, right? There's this disconnect between like playing the actual trick taking game, maybe in like a more conventional, well, how do you win at a taking game sense? Sometimes there's a disconnect between that and like the strategically correct play. And so you have all of these systems going on. It's such a murky decision space. It would be murky if the actions were not decided by trick taking. If you could choose any of these actions, it would be murky. But instead, you have to figure out how the hell you're going to do it with this set of cards, you know? Like it gets very, very complicated for what this is, for the experience that you get.
yeah, and then there's also the like the objective system, which is a little weird too, which is where you end up fighting about a lot of this stuff. Um and also like there's some weirdness too with there's two objectives that involve taking people's captives by like doing court stuff and also by like taxing people you can take captives. It's the tyrant objective. And then there's warlord, which is when you're like which is how much like ships you've killed. And those ones are like two of the ones that are easier to declare because the numbers for them on the trick taking card are lower, and so it's easier for you to lead with that and declare that as an ambition.
Right.
Um, but if nobody does declare those as ambitions, then you don't get your like ships back or you don't get your dudes back. And you can end up in a real situation where like you can't really like build more ships because nobody's been scoring
Hmm.
like warlord or tyrant,
So
which is
sometimes you end up in that situation because the other people at the table want it to happen. Sometimes it's strategically sound for them to say, "Well, I really can't let Ben get his ships back and have fun this game. Like I need to not allow him to battle in space, which is what the game is, but I have to deny him that sometimes, you know?"
That's
And it's
that's
like,
another real thematic disconnect. Like, what does that even mean? It's like, oh yeah, well we blew up 8 of your ships last year, so now you can't build any. It's
yeah, you
like
can't build any
it's like what?
until we score them.
yeah,
It's like what does
until
that
everybody
mean?
comes around and tells me how good of a job I did blowing all those up.
Right.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
like
The
yeah,
king's
it
got to give me a medal. Yeah.
yeah, it's the theme is non-existent here, but I mean like there's a Twilight Imperium equivalent to this, which is the intergalactic the interdimensional dinosaurs. What are those guys called again?
The
The Cabal?
Volwraith
The
Cabal.
Cabal. They can like steal your ships, but that's their thing is they're literally stealing them and using them to like reverse engineer the technology used to
Yeah.
build them and stuff. Like there's like a reason for that mechanic to exist there. Normally it's like the I feel like it would almost make more sense if when you blow up somebody's ship or capture their agent, if you just like if there were like a token to mark like a certain number, like you're just
Yeah,
putting
you could do
tokens
it
in your
on like a spin down die or
yeah
something like
like
that.
yeah I mean it's never going to be more than like 10 or something, so you just have like a D10 for that. And I mean, maybe there is a reason to like be able to deny people the ability to play the game. And again, that's kind of how this game is. It's kind of like, well, I could declare warlord, or I could just prevent you from being able to play the game.
Right. Like
And it's like,
and it's crazy because it'll be the person who can score the most from Warlord is the one having to think of, well, do I actually want it to be scored or not? You know? Like because they might be wanted to deny it. It might actually be the right play to say, I'm not going to score it now because those ships are going to sit there and I'll have the opportunity to score it just as well later. There's no downside to me to just doing it later, and I
It'll
can
actually,
just not
yeah,
let you have your ships.
it'll actually score more later because
Right.
you'll
Yeah.
get like the flip the objectives. It might be worth 9 points later.
Yeah.
Or I might be able to get my cities out because you have no ships to contest me, and then it'll be worth like 14
Right.
if I can like get it declared first and whatever. Well, and then like sometimes you just don't get the cards to be able to
that's,
declare the
yeah,
ambition that you want to be able to declare.
Right.
And you're like having to rely on other people to be like, I really hope that they declare the relic thing. I have a lot of relics, but I didn't draw any threes or I didn't draw any fives. And
yeah, I
I'm
think that's the core problem of the declare system, which is that this problem would not exist if you could just if every card was a wild card for declaration of ambitions. And I understand why this is what they were going for with this, which is that, the power of the card is kind of tailored to which ambition it is, and that's factored into the power economy of each card number. But I think the game would just be better if they were wild and like all of them, not just the seven. And it's kind of like if somebody was like, I'm denying your ships to you, I'm gonna make you declare this ambition. And
Right.
it's like somebody,
Now you have to use a card to seize the initiative, maybe,
yeah,
you
and it's
know?
like they would be like you're forcing the other person to counterplay you by seizing and then declaring warlord themselves just so they can get their damn ships back. But there are times in this game where like they won't even have the ability to declare warlord even if they seize the initiative
Right.
because they might even have like that card. And that just sucks. Like that just straight up, why is that in the game?
And I
There's
think it's a
literally,
really important point too, right? Because at my estimation, most trick-taking games get around that problem by, playing so many hands that eventually that variance is going to even out. I mean, your hand really matters in a trick-taking game. It matters a lot less when you're playing 100 hands. In this game, the most you're going to play is five. That's not enough time to reduce that variance to an acceptable level. You can totally lose this game from getting a few bad hands, even a couple bad hands, or even a bad hand just at an important turn, which isn't very satisfying when that happens. I mean, I don't want to sit down and have to think strategically on this in a very murky decision space where you're requiring that deep thought and be totally boned just because of the cards that I drew, or better yet, the dice in this game, which are also very, very high variance.
yeah.
Plenty of ways to lose on luck in this game
Yeah.
or
I mean,
win.
yeah, I mean, you could just always roll blue dice with the 50-50, you hit them or you don't.
Yeah.
If you're very risk averse, you can always do that. Um, I mean, I don't really like any of the dice in this game. They're all weird. Um, they don't feel good to roll. I don't feel good about making most decisions in this game.
Yeah.
Um, like it's usually just like well I get that's like like that sound is generally my experience playing this game is like
You made it more than once during the last
yeah
couple plays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the signature Ben while playing Ark's noise.
well I guess I'll do this like whatever
There are a few of them. Hey, Ben, it's your turn. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I
uh.
get like I said, I think I do think the trick taking is the strongest part of this design, and I don't mind that you can have a weaker hand but still like pivot or copy or seize the initiative. I think that's all fine. I just don't like that it's also tied to letting you to the declare ambition mechanic. That's so bad. I don't think
Yeah.
that that just should not be part of that.
Taking
That
that
should
out
not
would
be,
certainly reduce the variance of any
yeah,
given hand
that's a
because you can do
variance that doesn't
something
need to
with the
be there.
numbers. It's more about that ambition declare.
It's hard to, I think something Blake brought up earlier is that this game has a lot of randomness. And I think that for the amount of time that you're playing, it's a little bit much to stomach for that time. That's not to say that there aren't any long games with a bunch of randomness that aren't, popular or good. Obviously, Twilight Imperium has a ton of randomness, as I learned for myself once again recently after not being able to roll higher than a one for an entire 10-hour game or whatever. But This game definitely for how abstract some aspects of it are, and for how kind of tied together the card mechanics are with the ability to score victory points and things. I feel like it doesn't really benefit from adding more output randomness because there's the input randomness of the kind of cards. Um, and you don't really need to also have very swingy dice in the mix and also have the declare ambitions being tied to a specific card number. I think if it were the case that this game just had the trick taking as is, with declare ambition being wild, I think that it would feel tighter, that there would be more player control and more int and although it would be stuff that would be setting aside balance even, I think it would just make you feel like as a player you have a little more agency. And I get that this game is designed to make you feel totally out of control and like, you can't do anything and you just have to make the best of what you have. And that's intentionally part of the design. But even with that in context, I think the trick taking just that comes across already, I guess. I think it kind of like this is kind of overly indulgent in that aspect of the design, in my opinion. It's kind of like we have the ice cream sundae and now we got to have more whipped cream than ice cream. It's like the ice cream was good enough to get this point across.
Hmm. Yeah,
And we got the soy sauce on top too.
and the soy sauce. The soy sauce on the ice cream. It's a real travesty that.
Yeah, all on top of a peanut butter sandwich.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it was the peanut butter that was omitted.
Oh,
A
sorry.
jelly sandwich,
A
right? Yeah.
jelly sandwich.
Maybe
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a bad metaphor. I think that I
Maybe. I mean, who could say, right? I think it's hard. I don't think that's a knowable thing, whether it was
hmm,
bad or not.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
It was a metaphor, you know. We did it.
That much is true.
Yeah.
Man, I feel I've kind of said my piece on this. The one thing that I'll add is that historically I haven't much cared for games that, in my estimation, have a lot of randomness in them, and yet like the the actual decision space in my mind with a game like this, or I feel this way about what the hell is that game called? About Eclipse as well, is that the decisions you make matter, but they're sort of like the benefit of making like the optimal decision versus like a just a decision is sort of it's an incremental benefit. It's small. It's not one decision like that that's going to win you the game, or even two, or even three, or even four. It's going to be the whole accumulation of them. But the thing that loses you the game in this is luck. And I don't love that combo. And I felt the same way with Eclipse. It was like you could just lose on the luck, but if you wanted to win, you really had to make every play correctly or more correctly than others.
Yeah,
And
like making good
I'm not a big fan
plays
of that.
making good plays consistently is a prerequisite for winning, but it is not what actually wins you the game.
Right.
What actually, because if everybody's making consistently good decisions, what wins you the game is luck.
Yeah.
Because there's no single turn in this game that is so decisive.
Right.
Um, that
And neither
yeah,
is there like, oh, well, your plan of attack or your approach to this whole game. Maybe you're playing with these special alien powers and oh, you just understood that alien power so well, and so you adapted your play style so well and approached this game in a totally different way. That's not what's going to win you this. I don't think you know the your strategy overall. It's going to be these individual plays that ultimately feel disconnected from any larger strategy in my mind. I don't feel like it's easy to set out to do something in this game over a multi-turn period. It's kind of like you have to look at, well, what the hell am I doing right this instant? And you got to try to plan a little bit, especially in terms of like maybe I can hold the initiative in the trick taking, or when is it key to take that initiative and maybe I can hold it for just one additional turn after I seize it. Like that could be very valuable and you can let that play out. But in terms of what's actually happening on the board, I'm not totally convinced that you can really go in and implement some, you know, decision on how you're going to play this out. And if you can, then I don't think it's going to be what wins you or loses you the game.
Yeah. I historically do not like games that don't feel like they have much of a theme. Like I really like I'm here for the like story and the communal like, oh wow, that happened kind of thing. And this it like I said before, it feels like I'm just like it feels a little bit more like I'm just like tabulating a sum or like I'm just kind of like looking at a spreadsheet or something. Like there's not like a lot of very like explosive big moments that I'm like, oh yeah, that felt really good. That really feel like it felt like it like told a story or like this thing happened. It was just kind of like again, it's like, oh well, that guy did that thing that kind of sucked for everyone, including himself. You know, he like outraged the ent like this entire resource, and it like was the like move, but it just kind of felt bad. And then he scored some extra victory points, you know, and then like I don't know, this last game, it was like I felt out of it pretty early, and then I just continued to kind of feel out of it, and I didn't even really feel like there was much I could do to like influence the game one way or the other. Like if one of you guys had like really fucked me over, there wasn't really like any way I could throw it to one person or the other. It was just kind of like, oh well, they're gonna pick over my corpse now.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
There
I'm
was an
not
interesting
you couldn't even king make.
there was
yeah,
an
it's
interesting
like
point where Ben went to attack me and stole a pretty key card that Will had just set up the previous turn to be able to steal from me. And so by attacking me, Ben made Will in a weaker position. It's like, well, how does that make sense? Because now Will can't steal a card from me that he just used a whole turn setting up to do. It's hard to put in a plan of action here because the space is changing so much.
But then what it meant I did instead was I taxed Ben and then I blew up two of his cities and double ransacked him. And
Yes, you did do that.
it was like I would have been happy just taking the card from Blake. It would have
Right.
suited my purposes just as well. Instead, I had to
That
raise.
whole last turn was brutal for Ben because it felt
Yeah,
like the best play on a lot of turns. If particular cards were coming out, it felt like the best play was like, let's just kick Ben while he's down a little bit more because he didn't really have a presence on the board at that point. It was kind of me and Will on the board, and Ben had certainly had like victory points, but in terms of the board, it was like, yeah, like let's just bully him a little bit for the last round in case he wasn't already having a bad time with this one.
do you know what else is weird? That
I don't like
particular,
that was the optimal decision or what I believe to be the optimal decision. I don't like that about this.
like
Sorry to
obvious.
interrupt.
No. I was interrupting you. I'm sorry. Obviously aggression is the best card, but I think that some of the other actions feel like underpowered. I think that you should be able to build more than one ship at a spaceport. You know, like it feels like that's a really
Yeah,
unnecessary limitation. Because, I mean, how many pips do you have on the thing? It's like, oh no, he might build two or even three ships instead of one ship here and one ship in another location. It's just
right.
like, this is more agency being stripped. I mean, like, just let me build up in this place I want to defend or, a place I want to catapult move from next turn. I feel like so much of this game, and again, there's already enough of this in the game due to the trick taking. I already don't get to choose how I'm going to structure this chapter of the game. I have to play tactically, responsibly, I guess. But I have to already play very reactively. So I can't really make grandiose plans. That's fine. I get that that's a core part of the game design, but like it just feels like there's even more agency being taken from me than just the trick taking aspect. And I'm like, why? Like, why does more have to be taken from me? There is a sufficient amount that has been taken from me. You don't
Yeah,
need to take any more. And yet, even after that, there is more taken from me. And I think I have a really good understanding of this game after the last play in particular. Like, I think I know how to play this game, and I don't feel like is it doesn't make me feel good. Because
yeah,
of how
yeah.
much randomness is happening. Again, I can't feel too good about like having the six of aggression multiple turns in a row and like the inherent power of that because like people want to lead with aggression because of how good it is. Having the six means you can take the trick in a three-player game no matter what. unless somebody sees before you. And like that doesn't always happen, of course. And so it's very powerful to be holding certain sixes, and it's just random. It's just the way the cards are dealt. Like I don't feel like I deserved to have this six. And because there's only going to be a few in a three-player game, there's only going to be five aggression cards in circulation, right? The two through the six.
Hmm.
It means that like having two aggression cards means you have at least as many or more than anyone else. If one of them's the six, then you're in a commanding position for that chapter. And you're going to be able to like get the initiative probably for sure, at least one time for free, while doing an action you already want to do. And again, like I feel like you should be limited on like builds. Ransack the Court is weird. I don't know. It feels like,
Ransack the court is very weird.
yeah.
That's got to be my least favorite mechanic in this, but it's surrounded by all these other mechanics that, as you're saying, don't totally make sense. Like it's hard to wrap my mind around the game design philosophy of some of these things. There's so many pieces here that it's like you got to decide a little bit with this. We're meshing some systems, namely trick taking and area control that haven't really been meshed before. People don't have a touch point for how this is supposed to look, and you can't just throw everything into the pot here. Like we need to cut back a little. And I think you've both made some really good points, and the one that I've heard both of you come back to a few times is that a lot of the decisions just simply don't feel fun. And I just want to echo that now of like there's a lot of this game where even if I feel like I'm making the right decision and I sit there and I deliberate on it and maybe even works out in a big way and I get to advance my position on the board or I get a bunch of victory points or what have you, there's very little in this game that feels good to me from, the position of someone who's trying to approach this strategically and come to the best decision. And the lot of that, while also being able to sit with my buddies and chat and have reasons to interact on the board. And I do think this game is interesting in that it gives you plenty of ways to interact on the board, and off the board as well, be it with the court or what have you. But again, like there's there's not too many of them that I'm excited about, which I just find so odd. Um, because I want to be, but it doesn't get there.
I just think, but this game makes me think about, in a way, this game is motivational because my mind is racing while I'm playing this game with decisions in the design I would have made differently. And it's kind of a signature thing for Cole to sort of be like, well, people will king make, and I encourage that. And like, you can make deals that are non-binding. And of course, I expect people to do that, but it won't be in the rule book because people just had to figure it out. I think by not having these things formalized, the game suffers for it. This game might have benefited from a more robust diplomatic way to interact with other people. The only thing you can do is blow each other up. And even for like us who love like we love Forbidden Stars, where again the only thing you can do is blow each other up. There's a lot of interesting nuance in the movement and the politics of Forbidden Stars because of the order system and warp storms. And like and you can collude with people, be like, hey, I'm gonna move this warp storm here. We got to take care of this person. Like there's a lot of table talk in Forbidden Stars, actually, considering that in the 41st millennium there's only war. In this game, it's like there's even more war than in the damn 41st millennium. It's like there's really only war. And I feel like, maybe if there was some stuff in the court or in the tableau or resources to encourage some level of diplomacy or temporary teaming up, there might be some more interesting stuff going on here. But like I said, the only way you can interact with people is just to blow all their shit up. And it's not even the kind of like Komet style King of the Hill blowing stuff up, where it's kind of like we're all fighting over these points. And then at the very end of the game, when people have the top tier pyramids in Komet, people are like, okay, now I might try to make some last ditch effort to just finally break into that city and, get that one temporary VP from holding the pyramid. Here it's like you're just always waltzing around in other people's cities, blowing their shit up constantly. I just don't really think it's like, I just think it's excessive. I mean, it's
It's
just like
excessive.
it's excessive. I mean, like I just don't think it feels like in this design that it does feel like that Cole was reveling and sort of breaking from tradition with this game. And it is unique. And but tradition exists for a reason. There's some things we shouldn't forget. You know, that's all I'm
Yes.
saying. Anyway, I think I've said everything I want to say as well.
Yeah, I don't
I
think I
have a
have much
quick
more.
question for you guys before we go into ratings, which is how do you feel this game compares to Pax Pamir and Root? Because as much as I've said about this game, where I think it's pretty clear I'm not a huge fan of it, I think I do like it better than Pax Pamir, and I know I like it better than Root. Um,
Hmm.
the
I
art was kind of a point of contention on this. I definitely like Pax Pamir's art better, but
Oh, Pax
otherwise, I think
Pamir's.
I like this better in every other way.
I've played a good amount of Root online, and I've played some of it in person. I I like Root well enough. I like it better than this, I think. I don't think that Root has the problem with this that this one has for me, which is Root doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome.
Hmm.
Like this last game we played took 3 hours, and there's so many more games that take that long that I would rather play.
There was one
Um,
that day we were talking about doing
yeah,
We
Uprising.
were gonna have to
I
play him.
so wanted to play Uprising, and I was just like, and that was part of the reason I was so pissed was it was like, oh God, we're like, this is taking so long, and we're not going to get to play Uprising today.
It was. I'm
Um,
sorry.
and it's okay. I'd rather play like Tyrants of the Underdark 3 times in a row than play this game once.
I
You
Right,
feel
know,
that.
right.
it's
Yeah.
like there's like so many games that I just like would rather play for the amount of time that this took. Uh and like Root is one of them. Like Root takes like 2 hours sometimes. Like I think Root can take a good while, but like I don't know, there's something like simpler about it. Like I at least like Root kind of has the opposite problem, which is like usually it's like, oh, there's not like a ton that I can actually like do, or like my options are restricted by the faction that I'm playing so much that it's like, well, obviously I must go and genocide the cats. Like, like there's nothing else I can do. Like I have to do something. Um, or is this, I don't know. This one's like,
I think.
So,
Well, I guess all of us are gonna have different opinions here. I like Pax Pamir more than this. But not by much.
hmm,
I mean, part of it is Pax Pamir's theme is amazing. It's a gorgeous production, second edition Pax Pamir. I mean,
it
it's
is.
it's a beautiful board game. But I do think that I think that the Pax Pamir game has issues with endgame, which is typical. Every game of Pax Pamir is like, oh, well, there's the last, thing that came out, and I win now. And that's like, okay, well, good game. And that's just how Pax Pamir always ends. Somebody just wins randomly because the thing they needed came into the market, and that's the end of the game. So the end game in Pax Pamir, it kind of just dies with a whimper every time. That's my big beef with Pax Pamir. We haven't reviewed it on the channel officially, but the the kind of middle of the game in Pax Pamir I'd like better than this because I think spies in Pax Pamir are so much cooler than agents and arcs. Agents and arcs feel so underbaked, and the vulnerability of them to ransack the court makes it feel like you don't want to do it. And Pax Pamir, there are a lot of good reasons to be spying and moving around the tableau. And I think that one thing about Pax Pamir is it does have the thing where the game tells a story. It's going to be the story of the game will be like, oh yeah, the Russians started out strong, but then the Brits came in, and everybody switched alliances, and there's a little bit of like theme going on there that's going to like give something for you to latch on to. It's not a whole lot, but it's more than this game. This game, I feel like if you play arcs like 10 times, you just jam the game, multiple times in a day, it's going to blur together. And there might be like a couple individual times where somebody had stored up 6 fuel resources and had some crazy move, but for the most part I feel like it's just not that memorable. Like an individual play of arcs is not that memorable to me in the plays we've had so
Hmm.
far.
Yeah.
um yeah, that's just my feeling on it though.
I think that's totally fair. I feel like I've kind of lost that um that desire to discover more with Pax Pamir. And I still have a little bit of that with Arcs, even though I'm pretty sour on the game in general. Like I could see playing it another time or two and like trying to explore more. Um, Especially like, oh, maybe try this one at 4 or something and see how that goes. It seems like the BGG community is pretty split on whether this is best at 3 or 4, although more people have said 3 than 4. But there are certainly still a lot of people that say it's best at 4. So maybe it's good there. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, uh, interesting thing. I don't think any of us have totally vibed with this designer, even though he does seem to be very, very popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So shall we do some ratings for this then?
Yeah, we can rate the old arcs.
Yeah.
Ben, I think you might feel the most strongly of any of us. Do you want to start us off on this one?
Right. I mean, I'll start off by saying that I don't think that you can really make any great piece of art without like some people just fucking hating it. I think that's like a prerequisite. Like you obviously like you can't make something that pleases everybody all of the time. You know, at that point, you're just going to get something that's like designed by committee. If there's one thing I will say for this game is that it is not designed by a committee. You know, this is not like the most like, like middle of the road safe option for like, like this will obviously like please the stockholder interest, you know?
Hmm.
Um, like this is like it's going out on a limb and I can respect that. Like I can respect that it's doing something completely different. Like I've said before, I've never played a game like this. And if you're listening at home, maybe this is like your jam. Maybe you're trick taking all the time with your grandma and she's really cutthroat and you wanted to you want to be blowing each other up more. Like, if you want something a little bit more ruthless or like, I don't know, maybe like you really like that kind of murky decision space and you can really jam with it and you really just like playing intuition. It's not my jam. I'm just gonna give it like 5. Um, and that's like a purely subjective rating. It's just like I think I'd rather play Bloodstones than this. I like like I'd rather dig that up from the like archaeological layers.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'd rather play that than like, I'll go buy it from whoever Will sold it
Kind
to.
of a similarly weird game, Bloodstones, that also really goes off on its own direction. And it's interesting to say. I think I would probably say the same on Bloodstones over Arcs.
Hmm.
Yeah, like there's just like I said before, there's so many games that I can think of that I'd rather play than this one. Like that I'd be like, okay, let's buzz it out. I think I've played as much Arcs as I want to in this lifetime. In this brief time that I have on this earth, that is the amount of Arcs that I think is appropriate.
There you
Um,
go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's me.
What are you thinking, Will?
Is it me next?
Unless you'd not like to, I can certainly go.
I might be still tabulating. You want to go, Blake? I don't mind going though.
I'm gonna give Arcs a 4.5. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's certainly playable. Um, I agree with Ben's point that this game certainly has the ability to overstay its welcome. I think that that's going to be more true the better players are at the game, although maybe that's an ill-founded statement, but it appears that way to me. Um, yeah, wish it was more. Wish it was a bit better. I told myself I'd never turn a trick again, and I broke that promise for this one. And I don't need to turn a trick ever again. Again.
Yeah.
Again.
And I think, and you do say you wish it was more, and I think in this case, less is more. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah. Like I don't need like 4 more mechanics in here. That's not what I'm
yeah,
getting at.
Bloodstones is actually
Good
a good
clarification.
comparison for this game because I think both games would have benefited from like a paring down of the rules for like unnecessary parts of the rules.
I don't know. Bloodstones felt pretty simple to me.
But
I'm
it
not.
was simple except for when it wasn't. And I think
Yeah,
like,
I guess there's like some weirdness with Bloodstones from what I remember.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I prefer, what did I give Bloodstones, a six? I think I might prefer Bloodstones to this game. Although honestly, I don't really want to play either Bloodstones or this game again. I think
Hmm.
I've had my fill of both. I think I'm coming at it a five as well. Um, this game is like I did want to like this. This is what hurts, is like I always want to like Cole's games because it'll make my life easier. It means next time I go to the board game meetup and like people are playing his games inevitably, because somebody's going to be playing Arcs or Root or Pax Pamir sometimes, although it's less popular. Um, and I can just sit down and play and enjoy myself. And I have to curse myself. I have to curse myself that I do not enjoy his designs that much because, as I said, it'd be easier if I liked them, but I don't. And in that way, I'm being honest because I have an incentive to like them. It'd be so much better for me. But yeah, it's just maybe I'm a little old. Maybe I'm a little too old school with area control ideas. Maybe I'm a little bit too. I've been indoctrinated by the FFG cult of the 2000s and 2010s. But sometimes even setting aside FFG and Forbidden Stars and that kind of thing, and TI, of course, I just don't think this game holds up for people who are wanting the ability to strategize. And one thing you'll see in common with when people really love this game and defend it is they love oh, actually, here's a better thing. What's the tropes that they call like MTG players who like to win versus ones that like to brew? Is it like Timmy and Spike or something?
I know what
Um,
you're talking
Yeah,
about.
Something
what
of
were
that
those?
Yeah.
nature.
Is it Johnny? Anyway, this game is like for people who just want to win and don't care how they do it. I think there's an appeal here because it's sort of
Hmm.
like if the challenge is like I'm gonna win overcoming all this adversity baked into the system. I have to deal with a bunch of random bullshit from the dice, from the cards, from, maybe somebody just arbitrarily deciding to attack me when like it could have been someone else. And because that'll happen too. And it's like overcoming all these things is a rush for somebody maybe in those shoes. And that's why we get the people that are giving this like such incredibly high scores. But then there's also the people that are bouncing off it, and those are the people that aren't necessarily playing board games to win. There's a huge sort of pathological, psychological divide between these two types of people. And it's like the people who aren't playing the board game to win are playing for the experience of playing the game. They're playing because they want to enjoy the act of playing the game. If they win, good, like all the better. But like the important thing is that that play of the game was fun and it was interesting and they got to do the thing they wanted to do. And in this game, that'll completely drive those people off because like you don't get to do what you want to do. You'll have unspeakable things done to your corpse as it is unnecessarily curb stomped. And it's kind of like if you might go an entire play of this game and win and never do a single thing that you wanted to do. You just like played every hand and sort of did the right play. And so like this makes me question like all sorts of things in game design. It's sort of like when I'm thinking about designing a game, I'm like, how do I make the players have fun?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a game.
I
And
like
like
yeah.
and in this game, it's like I don't know. I mean, again, I think you can only have fun if your way of having fun is fundamentally different than the way I have fun, which is like I want to be able to plan and I want to be able to sort of enjoy the act of playing the game. I mentioned last podcast, my win rate in Forbidden Stars is worse than my win rate in Raw. And Raw is a game that plays the way that this game is envisioned to be played, which is you play it very intuitively and kind of on the spot, tactically, not strategically. And that works in that game because it's like a very fast-paced auction game without a board. And but like in Forbidden Stars, like I enjoy every play of the game because I just enjoy the act of playing the game. It doesn't matter whether I win or not. Of course, I'd rather win, but like every turn and like, there's always like some interesting stuff going on that I'm happy to be part of. And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I just
It's
don't get that from this game.
it's the same reason I always keep coming back to Twilight Imperium. It's like why I keep playing and why there's a community of people who enjoy playing that game over and over again. Like we had a game that we played, me and you with some other people. And like I think Blake messaged me in the middle of that game and he was like, how, like what are you doing? How's it going? And I was like, well, I'm bugging. I'm playing Sardak Nor. Like I'm having a good time. Like I'm going and I'm taking planets.
Hmm.
Like and then I like even like we were talking to that game like our buddy was saying like, oh yeah, I remember when you played the Hakan, Will, and you built like two War Suns and you built like 52 resources worth of stuff. And I remember you saying like, yeah, I was just kind of vibing. Like I wasn't really like planning to win. I just wanted to like do the Hakan thing and build like a ton of stuff, Like that was just kind of like
Yeah.
the goal that I
I
had
wanted to
set for
have the
myself,
big Hakan hero turn,
Yeah,
Like, why
Yeah.
not?
yeah, and I think that like there is this sort of there's some wires being crossed because it's like the people who just want to win and don't care how like they don't care about sort of the experiential part of the game as much. And not to say they don't care about it at all. There's going to be all sorts of disconnects and conversations between these two groups of people, and I think that them talking past each other is probably the story of the discourse around this game, which is like one group not understanding why the other group doesn't like it, and the other group not understanding how the other group can like it. And I think that's fine. Like, not every game has to be for everyone. And so it's just not for me.
Yeah. Well, and obviously
I,
it's like
I
it's a
disagree. I don't
spectrum,
think
right?
that's fine. I think that every game ought to be something that I like. And if not, then I don't think it was worthy of creation. And that is the stamp I'm giving to Arcs. I think it was unworthy of creation.
Okay.
And that's why it's getting a 4.5, which is a very
Mhm.
average score. Um, so you can decide what that means.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, as I said at the beginning, like we've seen some insane score inflation on BGG. The recency bias, I read an article, somebody had like done an actual study of scores over time on BGG, and there is, mathematically real, statistically real score inflation over time. And this is certainly there's recency bias in the top, 100 games, and there are some classics that are still there, but people are eager to give tens, I guess. I'm scared to give a 10. Every time I give a 10, you guys bite back at me and you don't give it a 10.
I don't, yeah. Hmm.
It's my personal mission to never give the 10.
Okay.
I don't think I'm ever going to give a 10. I don't believe in it unless it's like literally like, oh man, somebody made this for me. Like I don't know, like somehow this is like, put everything that I ever wanted inside of a game. It feels like it's made exactly for me.
That's like me if Aeon Trespass Odyssey was like a little less fiddly and didn't have the stupid terrain. It's so close to being perfect for me as like a Greco-Roman nerd and like also liking Evangelion. It's like the ultimate. They made this for me. But but yeah, I can see that. Anyway, I think that's all I've got. You guys,
The good people out there, keep your scores uninflated. Get out the pump. Put away the pump,
put away the
rather.
pump.
No
Yeah, don't
inflating.
be afraid to give it an 8.
Get out the pump and throw it away.
Right, yeah.
Destroy
Get
the
out the
pump.
pump so that it can be discarded,
Yeah,
you
Uh,
know,
exactly.
rather than gotten out again at a later date when rating a game that does not deserve a 10. Like arcs. There you go.
All right.
all right.
Well, see you guys next time.
See ya.
Bye.